In 1946, 1 year before the partition of India and Pakistan formed, there was peace and harmony between Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and other religious groups. India, not yet divided, was ruled by the British for nearly 200 years, and Indians weren't happy about that. They rioted and rebelled to get rid of British rule. The British didn't want all of India's anger directed at them, so they made a concept of divide and rule, which would make all of the religious communities to be against each other. But after World War II, Attlee's Labour government in London recognized that Britain's devastated economy could not cope with the cost of the overextended empire. A cabinet mission was dispatched to India in early 1946, and Attlee described its mission in ambitious terms. My colleagues are going to India with the intention of using their utmost endeavors to help her to attain her freedom as speedily and fully as possible. What form of government is to replace the present regime is for India to decide, but our desire is to help her to set up forthwith the machinery for making that decision. The British also knew that with their concept of divide and rule, there will be no peace between the Muslims and Hindus if the British were to leave India somehow. Pandit Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi decided that India should be a single state where all religions stayed side by side. However, the Muslims of India disagreed, as they knew that if India were to be a single state, then the Muslims would always be living under a Hindu majority in a democratic form of government, and the Muslims would always be the minority.
The Muslims and Hindus, since they have separate, independent way of life, religion, and they wanted to practice their religion freely. This could only be possible if the Muslims, they have their own country, independent country.
One Muslim, an educated British barrister who was widely known for his opinions for another country, was Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He and the Muslim League, a group that was founded to safeguard Muslim political rights, requested there to be one country for the Hindus and Sikhs, which would be India, and another country for the Muslims, which would be Pakistan.
But at the same time, the Hindu never wanted that the India should be divided. They wanted that yes, they should get independence, and the British should go away, and they should have independent India as a one country.
All the disagreements on whether to not or to break up India caused many killings, forced conversions, fires, abductions, rape, and ethnic cleansing. On August 16, 1946, thousands of Muslims protested for another homeland called Pakistan. Even though Jinnah wanted a peaceful demonstration, trouble flared up, leading to 3 days and nights of rioting and killing. 6,000 people were murdered and many more injured. These events of killings were called the Great Calcutta Killings. After this event, great violence emerged all over India, and the great country was now falling apart into pieces. Some strong leaders of India, such as Mahatma Gandhi, continued to try to convince everyone that India should stay united, but however, it was too late. There was suspicion and anger between all the religious groups, and it seemed like India couldn't stay united ever again. All these catastrophes scared the British, and on February 1947, they finally announced that they were going to leave India in June 1948.
Main leader at that time, who tried to convince the British and the Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah that let's get liberty, independence from the British, but we stay together. But Quaid-e-Azam, he convinced them, and he finally made the British government accept their demand that all those areas where the majority of Muslims are living, they should get their independent homeland.
Finally, it was official that the British Parliament had passed the partition and would now become a reality. Seeing that everything seemed to be settling down, the British decided to leave a year earlier, in August 1947. The British lawyer who had the job of breaking up India was Cyril Radcliffe. He was given the job to make borders that would divide India, taking into account religion and other factors such as railways and irrigation canals. Radcliffe finished drawing the new borders which split the key provinces of the Bengal and Punjab in two on August 9th, but the British decided to keep the new border drawings a secret until after independence, so the British wouldn't have to be blamed for any incoming violence. However, this only increased the murders and violence. Pakistan, its eastern and western wing, separated by around 1,700 kilometers of Indian territory, celebrated independence on August 14, 1947. India did so the following day. On the midnight of August 15, 1947, Nehru made a historic speech when he said, "Long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full of measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom." After the celebrations, Muslims that were in India had to move from India to Pakistan, and the Hindus and Sikhs that found themselves on the Pakistan side had to move to India.
The number of people migrating from India to Pakistan was much higher and much more than the one who were migrating from Pakistan to India.
The partition had now caused one of the largest human migrations ever seen in history, and it sparked riots and violence across the region. Hundreds of thousands of people to almost 1 billion were starving, sick, and dying. Thousands of refugees then started to board special refugee trains that would take them from India to Pakistan or from Pakistan to India. As many as 14 to 16 million people were eventually displaced, traveling on foot, in bullock carts, or by train. About 200,000 to 2 million refugees from both sides were killed. Trains carrying refugees between the two nations arrived full of corpses. Their passengers have been killed by mobs en route.
They were butchered, they were killed, they were tortured, and all sort of trouble was given to them.
Also, Muslims still living in India were mistreated and hurt, and so were the Hindus living in the new country Pakistan. While all these tragic events were happening, the militaries of the two countries were useless, as even the soldiers of both the countries were trying to figure out their and their own families' lives. All of these violent actions occurred because many people were attached to not only their religion, but to their territory and home. Also, the British were reluctant to use its troops to maintain law and order. All the violence was especially dangerous in Punjab, where weapons and demobilized soldiers were abundant. Also, both countries still had post-partition refugees, and both India and Pakistan had problems trying to cope with all of the amount of refugees, the number only increasing after the disputed arguments rose over which country would rule over Kashmir in 1947 to 1948. The first Indo-Pakistan War over Kashmir is fought during this time after armed tribesmen from Pakistan's northwest frontier province invaded the disputed territory in October 1947. The Indian prince, faced with an internal revolt as well as an external invasion, requests the assistance of the Indian armed forces in return for acceding to India. He hands over control of his defense, communications, and foreign affairs to the Indian government. Fighting continues through the second half of 1948, with the regular Pakistani army called upon to protect Pakistan's borders. The war finally ended on January 1, 1949. This war was only one of the dozens that were fought after the partition was taken into effect. In conclusion, the India-Pakistan partition of 1947, which created the two independent states of India and Pakistan, was followed by one of the cruelest and bloodiest migrations and ethnic cleansing in history. In India, the partition is considered a tragedy, while in Pakistan it is considered logical and inevitable, and the growth of Muslim nationalism is traced in the death of Indian history. Today, the two countries' relationship is far from healthy. Kashmir remains a flashpoint and both countries are nuclear armed. However, with the partition, there are now two countries, both who have one main religion to agree on.
They all love their motherland, the Pakistan, and they're all ready to give their life even for every inch of this country.